on SPHNs and infected larch trees. And just sort of cover the main topics. The two speakers today will be Jim Williamson, Tree Health Officer for Scottish Forestry, and myself, David Eadie, Forestry Consultant for SAC Consulting. What we'll cover, Jim will cover history of the disease in Scotland, how to identify infection, and the processes of confirming it is larch disease. And I will cover options for landowner through to restocking, also called replanting. So I will now pass it on to Jim to take it forward.
As per David's introduction, my name is Jim Williamson and I'm a Tree Health Officer with Scottish Forestry, and I cover mid-Scotland. So thank you for inviting me along this evening to do a talk. Put over a remorum on larch, and the specifics being asked to talk about is the disease background and its identification. So a wee overview of the presentation this evening. We'll cover the tree health team in Scottish Forestry, our aims, objectives and how we action our objectives, the ever-increasing risks that are out there that we deal with, and then we'll move on to remorum, the scale and progress of the disease, the climate and risk, how do we survey for the disease, the summary of our 2023 survey results for remorum. We'll lead into a wee bit of an overview on statutory plant health notices. David's going to cover that in the detail. I'll do a wee bit of biosecurity, and then also a wee plea to everybody reporting of any suspicious trees into the team so as we can investigate. So that's a wee overview. So the tree health team in Scottish Forestry, it's got 11 staff members. The head of tree health is James Knott. And then we've got a risk and programme manager, Jack Mackay, planning and contingency manager, Cameron McIntyre. Clary Burrow is policy advisor, supported by policy officer Flora Donald. We've then got a data manager, Madeline Murgatroyd, and supported by data officer Lauren Graham. And then we've got to the operations area. The operations manager is vacant. But then we've got 3 tree health officers covering Scotland, my colleague Ewan Purser in the north of Scotland, myself in mid-Scotland, and Daphne in the south of Scotland. So the team, there's an interaction between all the different members. What we're looking at is the data side. We're looking at capturing data. We're then looking at analysing that data against our policies. And then we're looking at our risks. And then our programming and our planning, and that then feeds down into the operation team in terms of what surveys and monitoring that we're actually doing on the ground throughout Scotland. So that's roughly the relationship between all the team members. So our aims as a tree health team, protecting our trees from harmful pests and diseases, monitoring the health of trees, and increasing the awareness and understanding of tree health issues. So how do we do that? Well, we're out there, we're carrying out surveys, monitoring and analysis of what we're finding. We're collating and recording data for all the different pests and diseases. We're working with forest research to facilitate science and research into the pests and diseases. And we're sharing our findings and information in terms of training and guidance to Scottish Forestry, Forestry and Land Scotland staff, private woodland owners and other stakeholders. And all this is then feeding into informing government policy. So, as I've mentioned, there's ever-increasing risks out there, and this table gives a wee snapshot of these increasing risks. Along the bottom, I've got a time bar, and on the left-hand side, we've actually got numerical numbers. So that's pests and diseases. So between about 1960 and about early 1990s, that 30-year period, we had 5 pests and diseases, numbers 1 to 5, starting with Dutch elm disease in the late 60s. And then from the early 90s through to 2020, for that 30-year period, we've actually had a further 15 pests and diseases. So we've actually had a 3-fold increase within a 30-year period. So the rhythm of the increase is getting quicker. Before we start on Remorum, just a wee flavour of some of these other pests and diseases. Great spruce bark beetle affects Norway spruce, so this is an individual tree that's been affected there. And then if we look at the aerial of stand level infestation, the trees are actually ring barked by the galleries, the Norway spruce, leading to death of the trees. Large larch beetle, again a gallery on an individual tree here as well, and then stand level infestation leading to failures of the larch. So if we look in this picture here, that's actually a Statutory Plant Health Notice that's been actioned for larch. So once the larch has actually been felled, the brash material is what the large larch beetle moves into. So it's a secondary pest that moves into larch, and it can be associated with SPHN larch felling. Pine tree lappet moth. So stand level infestation, this is in the Moray Firth up in the northwest of Scotland. Affecting the pine trees there. And Dutch elm disease, one of the historical diseases, individual tree affected there. And then stand level infestation, an example shown there. And looking beyond the horizon is also part of the team's work in terms of managing risk and feeding into policy. So things we're looking out for: emerald ash borer, Zaella, Ips topographus, and bronze birch borer. But that's a wee bit of a background on the increasing threats and some of the things we're looking out for and monitoring for. But we're here tonight to talk about Remorum on larch. So let's start to cover that area tonight. So Remorum was first found in rhododendron in 2002, and this was from a Scottish plant nursery. So it's originated in Scotland in the horticultural trade, and it wasn't until 2010 that it was found in larch in the west of Scotland. And then the following year in 2011, when we started looking for it in earnest, it was detected in Mull and also in Dumfries and Galloway. So it's been here on larch trees for the best part of 13 years. So Remorum, a wee summary about the disease. Causes needle loss, shoot dieback, bleeding cankers, and death of trees. This can be rapid. It can take 1 or 2 seasons to actually kill the larch trees. So the important word there is death. Remorum is a disease that once it's on the trees won't survive, they will actually die. And Japanese, European and hybrid larch are all affected equally by Remorum. So how is the disease dispersed? Primarily by asexual spores from sporangiae that are produced in the needles. These are thrown up by the larch trees. The main heaviest dispersal is in the spring, but there's also a slightly smaller dispersal late autumn. These are thrown up in the air. With mature trees, that'll give a fair height for the spores to spread. But what spreads them even further is actually the mist. So if we have a misty day, the mist hanging about, the spores are thrown up in the spring into the mist. As the mist moves, it moves the spores along. That mist can then fall onto adjacent larch trees or drop the spores into water courses, and then the spores actually build up in standing water. So the spores can be taken in by larch trees either through the canopy and the needles or up through the roots via standing water. And they can be spread over long distances. If we get a misty day and a wind, they will carry a fair distance. Also, it can be carried in soil and soil movement, organic matter, people's shoes, on vehicle tyres, and in animal paws. So what is the scale of the problem? Here is a wood in Argyll. May 2012. A nice mix of spruce and larch, and starting to be restructured with some coops coming in. Unfortunately, 1 year later, Ramorum has actually spread into the woodland and has actually started killing a large proportion of the larch trees. And this example here, in terms of the scale of the problem, Ramorum identified here. This is in July 2020, and it's on the Ayrshire coast. And 1 year later, Ramorum has actually gone right through the whole block. It's actually spread down to the adjacent block. You can just see a line of larch here done in gingery brown. So 1 year later, that would have actually followed down into the next block. So let's have a wee look at the disease outbreak across the country between 2010 and 2021 in terms of progression of the disease. The red dots you'll see appearing, that's positive confirmed outbreaks over the years. So just recap there. This is a spread of Ramorum from 2010 to 2021. So it was moving from the southwest of the country, Dumfries and Galloway, along into the Scottish borders, up into Argyll and the west coast, and then some sporadic outbreaks throughout the rest of the country, isolated outbreaks. But generally, that's the line of movement. So why has that happened? Why has the disease progressed like that? So if we look at the next slide, we can see the climate and risk, what's actually happening. So on the left-hand side, we've actually got a rainfall map of the UK. So red is high, coming down into the yellow and towards the moderate. So the Dumfries and Galloway and the west coast of Scotland, we can see vast majority of it is red and yellow. So high rainfall, which suits the disease in terms of the spore spreading in mist or through standing water and water courses. And then in terms of risk, the map on the right, the green shaded areas, that's the larch areas in Scotland. So again, we can see those are predominantly Dumfries and Galloway, Argyll and Bute and Kintyre. So these areas of the country are going to be prone to the disease. So we know the disease is out there and it's moving across the country. We know it's going to kill trees, so we want to identify it and we want to actually stop the progression of the disease. So here's a wee video in terms of how we survey and identify the disease.
Exploitation and conservation threats to Scotland's forests is disease. So the tree doctors are taking to the skies to try and diagnose the problem.
So today we're doing a surveillance flight over southwestern Scotland, and we'll be looking for trees that aren't looking well.
Paddy Robertson is operations manager of the Forestry Commission's tree health team.
From a helicopter, we can survey massive areas in a single day, and we get a plain view of the top of the forest, so the forest canopy. Even from a couple of kilometres away in the air, we can see trees that are showing signs of ill health.
Paddy and his team are responsible for the well-being of millions of Scottish trees. It's their job to prevent the spread of a growing number of diseases that can infect our forests.
At certain times of the year, different trees turn different colours. What we're looking for is trees that are going orange or brown at the wrong time of year. This is really the best view you can get of the forest.
From his bird's eye view, Paddy has spotted something that needs closer inspection.
Can you take us down here on the left, please, Vernon? See that there? Yeah, see the spruce on the back by the forest road there.
The team have identified an area that looks like it's infected with one of the most deadly diseases currently threatening Scotland's forests.
Mytoptera ramorum turned up on larch trees in Scotland in the last 5 years. It's a major issue in that it's behaving in different ways on different species. But the larch populations, because they're such big trees, when you get infection and they start to sporulate, you then get spores travelling big distances. If we did nothing, this particular pest would kill the majority of the larch trees, particularly on the western seaboard. Probably in the next 5 to 10 years, we're controlling it, but it's very much reliant on rapid action. Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for.
Having detected a potential infection from the air, the team now has to try to access it on the ground.
So we're going in here to follow up a tree that looks like it's in poor health. The tree we've identified from the helicopter. It's very obvious from the air, but when you're walking from underneath, it's not so obvious. So if you've got the actual location of the GPS, you can walk to it a bit quicker. If this disease is what we fear it might be, it's a highly infectious disease. So if we don't remove this tree and the trees around it, in subsequent years, you could lose the whole forest. You got it there, have you? Let's have a look. Oh, that one there. Yeah, there it is.
Identifying and felling infected trees before the disease spreads is crucial to controlling the infection. Having found the dying tree, Paddy and his team need to diagnose the problem as quickly as possible.
And you can see in here where I'm exposing the wood underneath the bark. It's very brown. Really not very happy at all. It should be green and a nice creamy colour.
A sample from the tree should tell Paddy what's wrong.
So we've got a little bit of the solution in the dropper. Stick it in the well and wait. That's pretty convincing straight away. Like a pregnancy test, there's 2 stripes on the LFD that you can see there. There's a T for test and C for control. If there's no Phytophthora present, the test line will not come up. As you can see here, it's quite quickly come up with a line for the control and for the test. So that's pretty convincing. I will still send a sample to the lab for confirmation, but at this site, I'd be comfortable we'll be informing the landowner and proceeding to get the site felled to try and control the infection of this area.
This forest is in the heart of Dumfriesshire, an area particularly affected by the disease. It's crucial that the infected area is cleared quickly to stop the spread and also maximise the amount of still healthy timber that can be processed and sold. There's 14,000 tonnes of timber to be harvested here. So this is where modern forestry's cutting-edge kit comes into its own. In charge of the operation is Mike Mitchell.
So one of the main tools that we have for identifying the disease is actually helicopter flights. This is a summary from 2022 of the helicopter flights around Scotland. So the black lines show the areas that have been flown for the year 2022. So I'll just explain a wee bit about this map. Okay, Phytophthora ramorum in Scotland, the country is broken up into management zones. The green is the priority action zone, the blue is the risk reduction zone, and the red is the management zone. Okay, so the disease is moving northeast across the country from the management zone into the risk reduction zone and then into the priority action zone. The current kind of front line of the disease is the interface between the risk reduction zone and the priority action zone. So we do 2 rounds of flights each year. We do 1 round in May, June after the first sporulation. This first sporulation will be about late February, March. So it'll start to show clearly on the trees that are affected in May and June. So we will fly in May and June, both the blue area, the risk reduction zone, and the green area, the priority action zone. And then we'll do another round of flights in August, September to cover the priority action zone again for the late sporulation. And then we'll also do one flight in the management zone just to check the status of the works that are going on in the management zone for remorum. So we cover about 1.3 million hectares of forest each year surveyed. And while we're utilising the helicopter, we can cover the whole of Scotland in terms of all the glens, the larch areas and the waypoints in 10 to 12 flight days. And it's pretty cost effective, 14p a hectare to actually fly and survey each hectare. In terms of drones, we've looked at these. These are supplementary as part of groundwork, but they're not cost effective for doing a full survey of Scotland. You would have line of sight issues, and also the operator has got to get into position each time. So, and drones only have a certain lens scope in terms of the area they can cover. The helicopter generally flies up the centre of the glen, and there's 3 forestry staff on board, a navigator at the front liaising with the pilot in terms of where we want to go. And then we also have 2 staff, one on each side of the helicopter with cameras with GPS units that are then spying either side of the glen as we fly up it, and we can go back and circle round for more detailed pictures. So spotting the signs, here's some examples of photographs from the helicopter. We might turn out about 3,000 or 4,000 pictures from the helicopter flights. We've then got to analyse them in terms of identifying the trees that are gingery brown. It could be other diseases. It could be green spruce aphid. It could be Dendropterus micans with brown tops. So we've got to identify the larch species and the symptoms on larch. So here's 4 examples. The cow one, relatively easy to identify, the larch there in the centre. The other 3, slightly more difficult. But once we've analysed the aerial photography, we'll then draw polygons on a database, a map database, allocate each site a number, and that becomes our cases for carrying out ground inspections. So second phase of works after the aerial surveys is the ground inspections. So we proceed to our field surveys. So we get a sample of the tree, and on the bottom left here is a branch with what we call a live dead junction. So the disease is coming down the tip of the branch here, and that material is turning browny red, and the branch towards the stem of the tree is still green. So this zone here is a live dead junction where the tree is actually fighting the disease. So that's where we'll take a sample, put it into the LFD and see what the results are on site. We'll then take that sample, the actual branch sample, tree sample, bark sample, send that to the Forest Research Lab, to the pathologists. They'll go on and then they'll sample it in the lab to confirm one way or the other whether the disease is positive on that particular tree in that particular forest. So for 2023, this is the summary of the results for the year, the summer season just passed. So from the helicopter, we identified 605 potential sites. 244 of these were in the priority action zone, the green zone, and 361 were in the risk reduction zone, the blue zone. So the map on the right here, the black dots, that's the confirmed positive sites for 2023. Okay, so we've got 338 positive sites, 56% of the total that we've actually identified from the air and surveyed on the ground. 72 of those positive sites are in the priority action zone on the map here predominantly. Moving further across into the Scottish borders from Dumfries and Galloway, Carron Valley to the north of Glasgow, Aberfoyle, and also coming back across to Strathcar. So 266 positive sites in the risk reduction zone. quite heavy positive findings in Argyll and Kintyre, and also Dumfries and Galloway. So at this point in time for 2023, 155 statutory plant health notices have been issued by the conservancies. 15 of these are in the priority action zone and 140 are in the risk reduction zone. These 140 in the risk reduction zone, these have primarily been from 2022. So they've rolled into being issued January, February of this year. The risk reduction zone is a lower priority, the blue zone, where landowners have until August of the following year to fell the infected trees, whereas the priority action zone, you have until February of the year following to fell the trees. So at this point in time, we've got 113 have been issued from 2022, 155 this year. So there's been about 40 issued from 2023, and there was 338 positives. So there's about another 300 still to be issued from 2023 in terms of statutory plant health notices. The vast majority of that remaining 300 will be the 266 positives in the risk reduction zone. We're really not wanting the priority action zones to still be sitting around for too much longer. And this just shows a wee bit more detail of the priority action zone for the Morum and the risk reduction zone. The boundary is going from Hoyk, Abington, through to Muirkirk, East Kilbride, Paisley, Port Glasgow, Helensburgh, Stracar, Inverary, through to Oban, Craigmuir and Mull, and up to Ardnamurchan. So that's generally the front line of the disease as it's spreading across the country. David's going to talk about statutory plant health notices, but just a wee lead in from myself. So we found the disease, it's been confirmed in this area here. There'll be a 250 metre buffer put around the disease so that we can be assured that any spores that have spread prior to action are caught. And that 250 metre buffer will then require action, i.e. felling of not just the infected larch, but potentially infected larch within the 250 metre buffer. We can see the light green there. And then there's then ramifications in terms of redesign of the forest block, amendments to forest management plans, and having to take felling areas and coops to wind firm edges. Statutory plant health notice, just a summary of the key points. The notice will detail the action required, the compliance dates, biosecurity requirements, movement and processing licenses. And one thing to remember is the overarching figures. Over the last 13 years, statutory plant health notices have covered 5,000 hectares of larch in Scotland. However, there's still 55,000 hectares of larch remaining in Scotland within about 2/3 of the country. So what we're doing here is actually slowing down the progress of the disease across the country and allowing landowners and growers who have planted larch for that larch to get to as close to maturity as possible prior to being harvested and going into normal markets. So it's slowing down the spread of the disease. And one important area is biosecurity. As mentioned, the disease is spread in moisture and our organic soils contain moisture. So type of boots up here in the top left, that's fine on site, but both owners, managers, contractors, anybody on a forest site, visitors, when they're leaving, their boots should be like the boots in the bottom right hand side. And that is just removing the organic matter and the needles and giving them a brush down or a wash down with water. Also spreading the messages not giving bugs a lift is a message, and keeping it clean. And there's resources out there. One I mentioned was Tree Alert. Download the app. Encourage any colleagues or friends to download the app if they go for a walk in the forest or work in the forest. What it allows you to do is take pictures of any trees that are looking unhealthy and a grid reference, and just submit it. That'll go to Forest Research. They will sift and then send whatever is submitted in terms of specific types of tree species, whether they're going to pathology, entomology, or whether they're going to Scottish Forestry for people to inspect the report. And also in terms of improving people's knowledge, Observatory produce a suite of field identification guides. So there's one in Pitofera Remorum. They're very good guides, very clear, lots of pictures, and it will improve knowledge. And that's all from me. Thank you for listening, and I will pass back to David.
So
that's it now, David. It's part of the screen. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. So just to cover what I'll be covering, basically what you as a landowner would receive from Scottish Forestry, the grants from Scottish Forestry, felling, and then your restocking options. So the first thing you get as a landowner, you get an email from Scottish Forestry saying that there is a positive outbreak and they're going in and inspecting it. In this case, there was a site near Kilmacombe, so they went and had a look at this certain area on the map. And in this case, unfortunately, they identified it was Pitofera Remorum. So they progressed to the next step and they sent out a Statutory Plant Health Notice to the client and also a list of approved agents. The Statutory Plant Health Notice is basically like this, stipulates all the details and then the requirement to fell it by a particular time in the year. In this case, it was the 31st of August 2023. Also, it shows you exactly where the bits that are needing to be removed or included in the SPHN are connected, and they are here. So in this case, that's a client of SAC Consulting who wanted to get it dealt with. So he asked myself, as I'm on the list of approved agents, to progress with the scheme. Felling permissions are required. Felling permissions are not needed when you're felling a larch under a plant health notice. If a small number of other species are needed to fell to get to the above trees, then you can do this. Needed if you are felling larch outside the 250 metre buffer zone. Landowners may consider this worthwhile because they're just clearing out all the larch on their site, and it just means that the chances of them having another visit from the plant health team is limited. Felling more than 5 cube of another species in a calendar quarter, larch mixed with another species, and you intend to fell the whole block. An example of this is here, where the chances of the larch is spread out throughout the whole block, and by going in and removing the larch, you destabilize the block and potentially the whole block wouldn't end up falling over or windblown. So you would need a felling permission or amendment to your long-term forest plan to alleviate this. So this is another example. It was a block in the same woodland near Dalry. A couple of sections of larch, dead larch can be seen. In this case, the likelihood is the forestry company probably decided to fell the whole block because of the risk factor of the rest of it falling down once the larch is removed. So grants, no grants, and why? No grants allows you not to replant the area. The client in the SPHN decided not to go ahead because it was just going to be too costly for himself. The other option is the grants don't allow you to replant Sitka spruce. So if you wanted to go down the route of planting more Sitka, then that would be your option. So if you go down the tree health route, you've got agent services harvesting marketing of £1,000. Larch clearing first 5 hectares, 112 £1,200. And then larch 10 hectares plus £300 a hectare. Restocking is £1,400 a hectare. This is a lot higher than your £300 for planting with Sitka or £550 for general restocking. Also, because rhododendron is a vector, is that right, Jim? Or subsequent thing, you can do rhododendron clearance mechanical 2,200 to 5,600 depending on the worstness of it. So your grants page, you go into tree health, and then it will give you a list of all the other aspects. That was sort of a roundup of what was available. So if you refuse to fell, Scottish Forestry will do the work that is required for you and then bill you for the privilege. It is not a matter of debate. Felling to waste or extraction. If the tree is, so felling to waste, if you're cutting across the field to get to larch and it's going to be more mess than it's worth, and if the area is very small or extraction is poor, extracted the trees are greater than 10 centimetres or trucks are easily accessible, volume is over 25 tonnes. So there's two options for selling your timber. You can sell it standing or at roadside. Standing allows the purchaser to organise the harvesting and you receive a price per tonne. Creates minimal hassle for the landowner. No upfront cost of the harvesting work, and you can receive various quotes. The other option is roadside. You manage the works, you organise the contract, and you organise the purchaser of the timber and the payment harvesting once complete. Restocking. This is an example of a restock site. This site was particularly good. Larch is advantageous because it doesn't actually have as much brash on the ground, and in this case, your options are to mound, or in this case, just a hand screef and direct plant. So your option for ground prep is mounding, which is hinge mounding, or in this case, continuous mounding for a native block, native woodland, or trench mounding where the brash is a lot more extreme. Trench mounding's more associated with more Sitka because of the branchingness and the volume of brash on the ground. So why you mound? Improve soil temperature, improve drainage around planting sites, improve moisture availability on dry sites, increase soil aeration, reduces weed competition, and makes the trees easier to find in thick vegetation. Tree species to avoid. I've lumped the ones that are at risk in this as well. So larch is your primary one that you don't want to replant. Douglas fir, western hemlock, sweet chestnut, beech, ash, and false beech are all susceptible to the risk and are wise not to plant on a replanting site. So your options for replanting, once you get that far, you can either go for bare root or cell-grown trees. Pros and cons, cell-grown trees are typically more expensive, particularly broadleaves. Cell-grown, larger window plant them. I know a lot of my clients, if they're doing the work themselves, they like to use cell-grown, and then they can sort of do wee bits as they gradually do themselves. Cell-grown can be left out for long periods of time before planting, as long as they are kept moist. Bare roots are lighter and can potentially be bigger. So tree planting, that's a sort of normal technique for tree planting and putting the tree in the ground. So your various options for protection. One, you've got tree tubes, and then you've got various sizes for different types of tree. And then spirals are designed for hare or rabbits, and the bull guards are designed for, as it would indicate, bulls. Your other option is the deer fence. It's more expensive, more reliable than just shooting. Trees are not forced out of the forest as much as with tree tubes. Summary, it needs to be felled, so you need to do it and then consider your options.